In the last decade, violent crime all over Britain has been rising.
There's a 23-year-old male.
With murder, stabbings and gun crime at record levels. The public wants something done, but how do we get it under control? My name is Chris Daw QC, and I'm a barrister who defends those accused of committing serious crime.
And I'm Ayesha Nayyar, a solicitor who represents victims of crime. Chris and I both have very different views on how to solve this crisis. The criminal justice system needs to get tough, and it needs to get tough fast.
I, on the other hand, think Ayesha has got it all wrong.
The get tough on crime approach to criminal justice is a myth. It doesn't work. We're doing that now. What we need is different answers. I'm going to show you what they are.
In this series, we will both be trying to convince you which of us has the stronger case. By hearing from the victims.
I'm still struggling daily, I'm still going to hospital, whereas he's done his time and expects a normal life.
Spending time with professionals on the front line.
The last thing that we want to do is be telling a loved one that, you know, their family member, son, daughter, husband, wife, brother, sister, isn't coming home tonight.
And even meeting reformed criminals who have committed serious crime.
Nice to meet you. Same here. You have to be prepared for violence at all time. I was always prepared because, obviously, the life that I lived.
At the end of the week, we'll be putting our cases to a specially assembled jury.
What can we do as a collective to make things better?
Who will be asked to deliver a verdict on a question that matters to us all. Crime, are we tough enough?
It's Britain's police forces who are on the front line of the fight for law and order. But should they be getting tougher? I think they should. Listen, my view's simple. Let's get back to old-fashioned, straightforward policing. Put more bobbies on the beat with the right tools to crack down hard on these criminals.
I, on the other hand, have a very different point of view.
It's all very well talking about going back to old-fashioned policing, but we don't live in the olden days. We live in modern times, and that means you need policing resources and policing methods that are sensitive to the communities that they police and address the realities of working with other agencies, in particular to draw young people away from crime in the first place.
Today, Ayesha and I are both hitting the road to talk to witnesses and gather evidence to support our cases, including
police officers patrolling the streets of our big cities.
They're not afraid to use knives now to get the message across, and that is either to commit robberies or other violent offences to get what they want.
Those who think technology is the answer to keeping law and order.
You have entered the warning area. Please leave immediately.
And the man who's trying to build a bridge between the police and his community when it comes to stop and search.
Please reach out, give me a call. Let's have a deeper conversation because you could be an ambassador for stop and search.
I'm spending the morning with two of Greater Manchester Police's finest. Sergeant Walker and PC Smith patrol the streets of the city all year round in good weather and, as is the case today, bad. First, I want to see their sense of the situation on the streets.
What's it like as an officer working in Manchester town centre?
It's got its challenges. As you can see, it's the heavy footfall, massive diverse area, many shops. It attracts so many different types of people coming to the city, which also attracts the wrong types of people as well. Recently, you've had quite a few murders where young lads have lost their lives due to knife crime, especially at Moss Side and Hume, where we're seeing it's quite prevalent, especially other local areas as well, where they're not afraid to use knives now to get the message across, and that is either to commit robberies or other violent offences to get what they want. It unfortunately is becoming more and more increased, and we ourselves are seeing it on a regular basis.
For Sergeant Walker, meanwhile, who's patrolled these streets for over 25 years, things have never been worse.
You've been on the beat for 26 years. Things have changed. Tell me about the types of crime that you are now seeing on the street.
Street robberies massively is a massive increase. That when I first joined the job was virtually unheard of, but now, and it's the younger element that seem to be doing it, robbing school kids for all their designer things, the mobile phones, big one, isn't it? But it's the willingness to threaten the use of knives and use them. And there's been some horrific occasions where they've... And again, I think it's a status thing. It's stepping through the ranks of, you know, I'm the tough boy amongst the group. One will threaten it, one might hold it for the others, but one takes that further step to using it. That's massively increased in my time, and it's the walking hand in hand with the drug supply as well, the possession with intent. We've come across that now more often than we ever used to.
The link between drugs and violence is well established, with gangs often using weapons to control and defend their patch. Sometimes innocent bystanders get caught in the crossfire. Yesterday, I got to see the sort of weapons taken off the streets by Manchester police as part of their Operation Sycamore offensive. For me, it reinforces the need for a strong policy of stop and search. But what do Sergeant Walker and PC Smith think?
Let's talk about stop and search then. If you were to stop someone like me, what would the procedure be?
Well, what we'd do, we'd explain the reason why we stopped you. So we'd explain our grounds. We'd tell you what we're looking for, OK?
Can I refuse to be?
No, you can't.
I couldn't?
No, you can't refuse to be searched, because we'll explain the grounds why we're being searched, what power we're using, what we're looking for. You know, we'd identify ourselves. You can't refuse to be searched. It'll be told to you that you'll be detained for the purpose of a search. Now, whether that be that you are free, calm and compliant, or whether or not you're restrained and placed in handcuffs, you can't refuse to be searched.
And what is the actual search procedure?
Well, we'd go through outer garments. It can't be an intimate search, so we have to do all the clothing, your padding down and your pockets, but it'll be gender related, so we'll do male on male, female on female.
As Sergeant Walker explains, however, those suspected of carrying weapons aren't always compliant.
What's the reaction from people that you stop and search? What is their attitude towards you and what you're doing?
I think that's been the significant change over my time. When I first set out as a cop, people would stop, no problem, you know, they'd comply with you. Or the ones that run off had something on them, but the ones that would stop and they'd comply with you. Now, it's almost like shock horror. My God, you want to search me, you know, what's all this about? I know when this Operation Sycamore first started, you know, our cops, when we stopped searching people in Piccadilly Gardens, they were getting swamped by people because the youngsters' reaction was, well, hang on a minute, why all of a sudden you stop searching me? And there's quite a significant reaction towards that.
For me, it's no coincidence that as the number of stop and searches declined over the last 10 years, the violent crime rate has risen. And that's why I think people want the police to be given more powers to use it. But what do these bobbies on the beat think?
Do you get the impression that the law-abiding citizens of Manchester support the stop and search procedure?
Very much so.
Reduction of violent crime. You know, the last thing that we want to do is be telling a loved one that, you know, their family member, son, daughter, husband, wife, brother, sister, isn't coming home tonight, because that is the worst thing that we do, because in a short sentence we'll ruin their life, and we don't want to do that. That is not something that we want to do. We want to make sure that everyone's safe, and by stop and search you can reduce crime, you can, you know, make an impact on your community.
Often, however, it is the officer's life that is put in danger by carrying out duties such as stop and search, which is why many are calling for officers to be armed with their own appropriate weapons for the job.
What type of gear have you got then on yourselves to protect you and to also enforce the law?
Well, we've got a wide array of tools in our arsenal, so to speak. The first one, the main one that we have is a taser. Obviously underneath there is the taser. It's an electronic device. It does carry 50,000 volts. When we've had to use it and deploy it, quite a lot of the times we've not actually had to fire the device, which...
Just the threat of pulling it out
yes.
would stop someone?
Yeah.
As this training demonstration shows, however, when tasers are deployed, the results can be highly effective. And PC Smith has seen this for himself on active duty.
There's been situations that we've gone to where it's been necessary to use it. Like we've touched on before, they've become aggressive. It's not, if we could go to a situation and talk to someone and they could be calm and compliant, we can get the end result that way. I'd do that every single time I go to that incident, but a lot of the times we come to people where they're not listening to reason, and unfortunately we are having to use our taser, CS spray and our batons as well.
Not everyone agrees that all police should be routinely armed with tasers, but it's not a view Sergeant Walker agrees with.
It's a really good thing. I think, me personally, any cop, operational cop who wants a taser should have one. It saved us from a lot of injury where we have been confronted with knives, hammers, all sorts of stuff in the past, and that is a really good preventative measure.
While Ayesha has been making the case for a tougher approach to policing, I want to propose a completely different way of doing things. One that's already taking place on the streets of Glasgow with great success.
I've come to Glasgow, once the murder capital of Europe, and in the last 15 years they've halved the number of murders and dramatically reduced the levels of violent crime. But they haven't done that by getting tough and just locking people away for longer and longer periods. They've used creative strategies across the whole of government to make a real impact in the communities where knife and gun crime were at some record levels. And I want to know if it's possible to take the lessons from Glasgow and take them all over the United Kingdom.
In 2004, Glasgow had a murder rate that was double that of any other Western European city, with knife crime and gang violence out of control. Traditional approaches to policing had failed, and nothing seemed to be working. I'm meeting a man who remembers those times only too well, because he was on the front line, former Chief Superintendent of Strathclyde Police, Niven Rennie.
We've seen an epidemic of knife crime in England, but you're no stranger to that here in Glasgow over the years.
No, Glasgow's always had a bit of a reputation for violence going way back. And by 2005, it was territorial gangs. There was people running through the streets of Glasgow with knives and machetes and such like. We had that reputation, and we had to do something different. So it was the World Health Organization again who said that a public health approach should be adopted. You should treat violence like it's a disease, and with every disease it has symptoms, and if you can identify these symptoms, you can treat them. It was also recognition that you can't arrest your way out of a violence problem. You've got to work with other people. Police can't do it themselves.
In 2005, the Violence Reduction Unit was born to take a joined-up approach that involved the police working with the NHS, with schools, education and housing to tackle crime. The results were nothing short of revolutionary, turning Glasgow from a crime hotspot into a beacon of hope. Today, Niven runs it.
And in practical terms, on the streets, what difference has it made to the way that people live their lives and the risk of becoming caught up in violence since this
we don't
change?
see the violence that we saw in the past. I mean, I recently spoke at a school who wished to see what violence was like on the streets. I had to go back to 2004, 2005 to find footage that I could show them. So that in itself has shown that we have tackled it to a certain extent. The gang issue, we still have some gangs, but not in the way they were. Not with the violence they were, not with the numbers, not with the fights from street to street. So that has disappeared as well.
The ultimate aim of the VRU is to intervene with offenders before they get to the likes of Polmont Young Offenders Institution, where, as I discovered yesterday, crime starts at a very young age.
Obviously getting in fights, setting fires all the time. Obviously that's when I was a wee guy, but as I got older it got worse, know what I mean?
One man who experienced such an intervention is Callum, who I'm meeting in a cafe set up for and run by former offenders. It's called Street and Arrow.
I was involved in gangs for many years. A lot of violence in my life. I've been...
What age were you when you first got involved in gangs?
11.
11?
Yep. I've been the perpetrator and I've been the victim. I was the victim of violence long before I was the perpetrator. I carried a weapon daily through fear.
From the age of?
12.
And when you say a weapon, knife, gun?
Knife.
Knife, from the age of 12?
Yep.
And in the end, did that land you up inside?
Yeah, I went to prison. I was in young offenders institutions when I was 16. I was in adult prisons through my 20s, all through violence.
Each time he got out, Callum ended up back inside, an alcoholic unable to get a job. And then he reached his lowest ebb.
I was nearly murdered in my front door. I was stabbed 9 times. Life was very dark at that point. This is going into I was 25 at this point. I was involved in other levels of criminality. I never seen any way out. I was admitted to A&E for the 17th time due to knife injuries, and in there an intervention was done with me.
The Violence Reduction Unit, based inside A&E, took Callum under their wing. First, they got him sober, and then they helped him get his first ever experience of work here at the cafe.
What Street and Arrow does is it gives people like myself who've got offending backgrounds with a desire to change their life an opportunity to come on here, be mentored one-to-one, counselling sessions, but also to learn transferable skills and get into a working routine. And it appealed to me massively, especially the therapeutic element to it, because I knew that there was trauma existing with myself and I had to address that, and that was an opportunity to address that along with work.
Callum credits Street and Arrow not only with turning his life around, but with saving it. Today, he's risen through the ranks to become a mentor himself. But it's the effect on his kids that matters most to him.
My kids no longer, they've got their dad back, they've got a responsible father. They don't have to come and visit me in prison. They don't have to see me nearly get murdered on my doorstep. They no longer have to live with that fear. I'm there to do the homework with them, I'm there to tuck them in at night. They've got their dad back.
For many on Ayesha's side of the argument, this is the sort of project that shows that we perhaps become too soft on crime. But what do the current police think? Sergeant Dario D'Andrea is a serving police officer who works closely with the VRU.
Some people watching this, and maybe even Ayesha, who's the lawyer who's on the other side of this debate in the series, would just say that really we're spending money and time on criminals and what we should be doing instead is locking them up. What do you say about that?
And what I would say, if you take the human aspect to one side, you know, giving people second chances and the humanity side of it, put that to one side, let's look at the financials. It costs, on average, £40,000 to £45,000 a year to lock somebody up. One of the guys that we've had through our programme, the NHS, looked at him and how much has he cost, all the times he's been in and out of A&E and all the costs attached to that. It worked out £500,000 just for him. So if you forget about the human side, look at the money side, how much we're saving, and also these guys are now working, they're paying taxes, they're contributing. So if you even just look at it from the financial aspect of it alone, it's worth doing.
So successful has the approach been that other police forces all around the UK are now following Scotland's lead, including Liverpool, Cardiff and London. Even Manchester, where Ayesha is today, are setting up their own violence reduction unit. For Callum, however, you simply can't put a price on what he's got out of the scheme.
I make no mistake about it. If I wasn't here, I'd be dead. That's the reality. I would be dead. If I had left that hospital and went for retribution, I don't think I'd be in prison, I think I'd be dead. My son would be fatherless, and I don't know where he would end up.
One of the things that drives me mad is this constant argument on behalf of the Lock 'em Up Brigade that all we need to do is build more prisons and send people away for longer and longer. Speaking to Callum and hearing the support from the police here in Glasgow, it's obvious that that approach didn't work for Callum and it isn't working for many others. It's why we get more and more knife crime, more and more violence on the streets, because we're locking people up with absolutely no attempt to look after them, to sort out what they're going to do when they get out. Programmes like this should be rolled out across the country to divert people away from the criminal justice process, to find them jobs, to get them into education and to get them into a life which means that we're going to have fewer and fewer victims of crime in the future.
While it can't be denied that Scotland are having successful results, I worry that we're in danger of turning our police officers into social workers. And that isn't how I want valuable police time spent. Back in Manchester, I'm joining officers as they visit the house of a local man who's been making calls to the emergency services under the influence of alcohol.
The problem with this chap is what you'd call class as a binge drinker. So he doesn't drink on a regular basis, but when he does, he drinks to the extreme, to the point where he actually can't remember what he's done, and that's then when he starts to phone the police and the ambulance. So to put it into perspective, I think within a year we've had in excess of 100 calls to both the police and the ambulance.
How are you in yourself?
Getting there.
Getting there?
Yeah.
The problem being is when you call the emergency services and the ambulance because you feel as though you need help, but then you're phoning them 2, 3, 4 times, and when they turn up here, you're just being abrupt and saying you don't want to go anywhere, you don't want any help, telling them to leave, and that's down to the alcohol. And we accept that that's down to the alcohol because, to be honest, when you've had a drink, you're not a very nice person to try and communicate with. But whilst you're sober now, as I've said on many occasions, you're quite pleasant to talk to and get on with. What we want to try and do is deter you from drinking to excess. And the only way that we can do that is by putting an order in place that you actually get help.
They're still up there with him, and it's brilliant what they're doing, and I completely respect that. But with so much crime out there, is that the best use of police time? I don't know.
I'm going to put a case file together so that we take this case to court, ultimately to try and get an order put in place against you. Okay, so for that case file to go in, for me to put a statement explaining everything that's happened, we're just going to caution you, okay? So you do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned, some for which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence, okay? So you understand what it is that I'm going to be doing and ultimately what the outcome is that I'm hoping to achieve.
Caution issued. I'm keen to explore the question of whether this is the sort of service the police should be providing.
This is the type of policing that the community want. They want to see a police officer walking down the street. They want to feel safe. They want to see a friendly face who's here on a regular basis that they can interact with, and if they've got a problem, they can approach. And I feel as though in this community, especially with the amount of time that I come down here, that they can approach me and speak to me about anything. And I do get that on a regular basis. Whereas many other officers, if they're only showing up on the street once a month, twice a month, they might not get that interaction which I, as a neighbourhood officer, get.
We've seen two very different types of policing here in Manchester today. One that's serving the community and one that's robustly protecting it. But what links them both is that they're about getting uniformed police officers out from behind a desk and onto the streets with the tools to do the job. And that's the sort of policing we all want.
As part of the trial process, both Ayesha and I will be cross-examining witnesses who might challenge our position or even change our minds.
So let's find out where we're off to next.
There's no bigger supporter of the police than me, but Ayesha's argument that the police should be given more and more weapons and more powers to stop and search and lock people up just doesn't work. I'm going to send her to a community of people who are affected directly by police action that gets out of control, just to see exactly what happens on the streets.
Chris thinks all the police need to do is give these criminals a big hug. That's absolute nonsense. I've heard from the police themselves. They need the right tools to do the job properly, and that's why I'm sending Chris to investigate the latest technology. I think even he's going to be impressed.
Like stop and search, the role of technology in helping police fight crime is one that is becoming increasingly controversial. For some, like Ayesha, it offers the opportunity to target crimes where they happen most and identify those individuals most liable to commit it. Others, however, think that it presents a grim picture of the future, and that includes me.
I'm on my way to London, to Europe's largest security technology conference, to see some of the latest kit which is used in the fight against crime. Now, we all know that there are CCTV cameras everywhere we go, but they are taking it to a new level with some of this technology, and I have real concerns about whether we all want to be monitored, have everything we do on a computer somewhere, and whether that's a price worth paying if we can make a contribution to reducing crime, or whether it's just a step too far.
The argument in favour of technology says that if you're not doing anything wrong, then you've nothing to worry about. But I wonder if you'll feel the same after seeing what's on display here.
Attention.
Hi.
You have entered the warning area. Please leave immediately.
Every time we walk down a high street, one of these cameras, everywhere you go, all the time, someone knows where you are.
First up, I'm meeting David Gilbertson, whose company provides body cameras to the police.
Now we've got our very fit young constable here. Yep. What benefit does he get from wearing one of your cameras on his chest?
He has the benefit of feeling secure himself, but the key element really, because we have 4G transmission built into our unit, is that he may enter a situation where he feels either threatened or whether he feels he needs assistance to solve a problem. He can press the top button down and that will send an alarm back to a control room. Somebody will then see what he can see, hear the conversation and have the GPS location coordinates. They can then send other people out to assist him.
And so instantly deploy to a situation where an officer's in trouble and maybe coming under, under pressure in a public order situation or something like that. You can straight away you can deploy resource.
First used by Devon and Cornwall Police back in 2006, body cams have been taken up by forces around the country. Today, tens of thousands of cameras are in use by our police. For David, they are an essential tool for the criminal justice system.
They say a picture paints 1,000 words, and with picture and with audio, there is no ability to misinterpret what's actually happened. And people's memories do change over time. You have the real evidence there.
If body cams are the first widespread example of how the police have embraced technology in the fight against crime, then facial recognition is surely the next frontier. And here at this security exhibition, they have the very latest artificial intelligence technology for policing.
What we're seeing here is all of us, all the time, and they're using this demonstration with all of these hundreds and hundreds of figures to show the way that cameras can pick up what we're doing all the time, and even going so far now as to monitor exactly what people are doing all the time.
But there's one form of technology on display at the show that perhaps more than most, in my view, represents the future of policing.
We're going to see the latest drone technology, the most sophisticated kit on the market, and I'm going to speak to Illy, who runs the company that makes this equipment.
This is a full autonomous drone solution that is capable of taking off, conducting a mission, getting back and landing on its own. So it's going to be doing autonomously patrols. It can replace theoretically, 2 guards going in a patrol car. And it can do patrols every day, 24/7 if you have a few of those units available. According, you need to have enough battery to run that. So it's going to be doing patrols. It's going to be using a high-definition camera, but also a thermal camera. And since it has computer vision and artificial intelligence on board, it's also capable during patrols to do detection of vehicles and people.
Body cameras, facial recognition, drones and artificial intelligence. Is this where we're going? And is being constantly monitored a price we're willing to pay in the fight against crime? Simon Banks, chairman of British Security Industries, thinks we have to be positive about this technology.
What's your take on how the technology that we're seeing at an exhibition like this is contributing to the fight against crime?
Technology is the greatest defence on crime. It gets my vote because I feel a lot safer knowing that people are monitoring and watching, and there is what I would call intelligent surveillance out there protecting the public.
We've seen some of the technology here, and frankly, and it's those of us who are not from your industry have seen things that we didn't know existed. Some of the technology is very much almost just feels like 22nd century. It's so sophisticated. What for you is the next wave of security technology, and how is it going to impact on the fight against crime?
Well, I think if you walk around IFSEC, the most obvious thing is the rise of the CCTV camera, and it's a bit like TV screens. It's not what you have, it's what you do with it. And I think the engines and the platforms and the cloud services that are behind our CCTV, and that's where the real intelligence is. So whether it's facial recognition, counting, thermal imaging, it's what you do with that camera.
Well, I feel like I've certainly heard the case for the use of technology in helping fight crime, but I'm still not convinced. In much the same way as I don't believe the police should be routinely armed, I'm not sure they should have access to whatever surveillance equipment is currently available. But to help address some of my concerns, I've arranged a sit-down with the current Surveillance Camera Commissioner, Tony Porter.
How big a role does this new technology play in policing and law enforcement?
Well, it's huge. You look at 99.9% of homicide investigations, the police use this technology. You look at every terrorism investigation, the police use this technology. The police need this technology, let's be very clear. But if it's going to be used for low-level issues, for societal issues, to track the citizen, then people like me have to say no. Clearly people like you would say no.
Big topic at the moment is facial recognition. What's your take on that use of that technology?
I think it has a place. I think on a case-by-case basis. I think when the circumstances are serious enough for that kind of invasive technology to be used, I think the public would support it.
But I think the real issue is, what about people walking down a public street? And a public street at the moment, if I walk down any street in London, I'm going to be filmed from 57 angles in the space of 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And no, I've given no consent to that, and it happens whether I like it or not. So is there any way to put the genie back in the bottle?
Somebody has to stand up for what kind of society we live in. Our civil liberty groups do, I know my fellow regulators do, and society, the citizens looking at us going, so is this a good thing or a bad thing? And I think we have to inform them, and then the society, the citizen, has to draw their own conclusion and help us form our views. Technology is moving at twice the speed of sound, yet legislation and regulation is slow, and it hasn't caught up.
While Chris remains to be convinced about the use of technology in policing, I'm equally sceptical about why anyone would object to the use of stop and search. But I'm willing to listen, especially to those communities that are affected by it the most. And so I'm on my way to Tottenham in North London to meet Ken Hines, whose personal experience has left him convinced that a new approach needs to be adopted.
Tell us about your personal experience of stop and search and how that led you to form your group.
Well, you know, I've been stopped over 125 times.
125 times?
Yes, I have. That's over. I'm now 60, so, you know, it's been quite a number of years, over quite a number of year period. And I'm still being stopped and searched now.
You don't look 60.
So I try not to rock up to that either. But the simple thing is that, look, you know, a lot of the stops were done professionally. And when it's done professionally, I've got no issues. You know, they've come up, they've had a conversation, they explain themselves, and I'm happy with that. But there's been some time that they've done really in a negative way, where they've rocked up, they've grabbed me, they've thrown me on the floor, they've handcuffed me, then they've picked me up, and then they've asked me to explain my why I'm here or answer their questions. But after being violated in that sort of manner, do you think I'm in a mood to have that conversation? So I'm just saying, if that's me, and I'm a person who's got a voice and got a platform, what is happening to those young men who's got no voice and no platform? It led to me setting up this group called Harringay Independent Stop and Search Monitoring Group. And what it is just to really, because what I realised, where the biggest issue was with the police is on the engagement. And what it is, it can cause a negative reaction from the person being stopped. So the biggest advice we give to young people is to comply with the police request and complain if you think you've been hard done by. This is what we're pushing forward with.
The theory behind Ken's approach is to build a bridge between the police and those who find themselves on the wrong end of a stop and search. And as we chatted, I got to see what that looks like in practice.
All right, guys, yes. Goodness, all right.
Ken, what are we witnessing? What's just gone on?
Well, it's quite clear that something's kicked off, and because I see the police has closed in on him, it seems like they probably know that he's probably, from the way that they've acted, these are the undercover police who's actually probably pointing him out, and the way that they rocked up to him and put him straight into handcuff, it seems like they probably know something much, you know, that's he's fitting the description that they're probably looking for.
Is that stop and search?
That is a stop and search. That is definitely a stop and search.
How does that make you feel?
To me, it's a regular thing. It's nothing new. But the fact is, just because we see this happen, we just don't want to make the assumption that it's what it is.
As they continue their questioning, Ken decides to see if he can be of any assistance. Within moments, it's clear he's made a difference, as any heat is taken out of the situation and things are clarified.
I just wanted to find out what was going on, what was that about, and it's turned out that the police have got some intelligence that up to 40 young people were seen ready to rocking up to go and have a fight. And they've been given the intelligence, they've come down, as soon as the police come down, they've all run off. And so the police is just out looking to see what's going on. And they've actually picked up this young man as a suspect, but then they've realised he's been excluded from the inquiries, and the police asked me to say, keep an eye out, that if I do see any group, have a conversation and see what's going on and to squash it. This is what we do.
Eventually released, I get the chance to meet the subject of the police's stop and search, and Ken is keen to give him a pep talk about his rights and responsibilities.
My advice to you is always just stop, comply, regardless whether you think it is right or wrong, and complain. This is the card that I give to young people. That they've got more details on my website, but it's important. The top tip is it's about keeping calm. So I'm sorry that you did that, but please, what I would ask you to do, please reach out, give me a call. Let's have a deeper conversation, because you could be an ambassador for stop and search, understand? You know what I'm saying? To learn from this experience, because you can tell other young people what happened to you when you did what you did. You hear what I'm saying? And you was innocent. You're just brave. So please, I'm your uncle, you hear what I'm saying? And I'm out here to safeguard you. Bless. All right?
As part of Ken's crusade, he also wants to find people in the community who can join him. In particular, he thinks victims of crime can help those who commit crime realise the consequences of their actions. One such person is Pauline.
Tell us your story.
Well, quite a while ago, maybe a couple of years ago, I was a victim of knife crime. It only just came to surface recently because I blocked it out. And it was a whole gang. They pull a knife and put it to my throat, rubbing it against my neck. So I couldn't really move at all. So I think must have been about, could be 10, 15 minutes. Eventually, the guys, because it was a group of men, they're saying, "Oh, come on, just let her go, let her go, let her go." And he moved the knife, but then there was a bit of blood there. I got home. I was in shock. I didn't say anything to anybody for years. So one thing I will say is that I've done a lot of community stuff in the community support. They need to stop killing each other. Deaf need to. We need to live. You need to live, and I want to tell you, you need to live. You have a purpose. You have a destiny. You need to live. Your parents are crying. There's too much drops of blood cried. People are crying too much, and there's too much funerals. People are going to the graveyard every minute, the graveyard, and burying young people.
With your passionate message, and you really have been through a real trauma, and even these years later, I can see that pain in your eyes. Would she not make a great auntie for your group?
I know you would. Because Pauline, when you tell me about the street pastors and the things that you have done already, I know. And it's just not just we're dealing with the low level, we're dealing with all levels.
Yeah. Chris sent me to meet Ken because he wanted me to see the other side of stop and search, and I really feel like I've done that.
I'll be honest, Ken, I came here today to give you a hard time and to challenge what's going on here right now. But we've met a victim, I've seen what you're doing in the community, and hats off to you. You have maximum respect from me. Well done.
Thank you so much. But look, it's not about me, it's about making a difference. We've seen victims in different shades here in that small space of time, but we work on both sides. We don't have victim and perpetrators. We just have be non-judgmental, and we just want to stop the violence. And you can only do so by working on both sides to diffuse the situation and get them together to look at each other in a more positive way.
I'm having one last walk around the security exhibition. So far, I've largely heard the arguments for the use of this technology. But what about the case against? One group trying to stop intrusive surveillance in our lives is civil rights organisation Liberty. I'm meeting activist Hannah Couchman.
What's your take on the increasing use of technology to monitor the public and to support policing operations?
Well, Liberty have really significant concerns about the rights impact of the use of these technologies. So first of all, and perhaps most obviously, your right to privacy, your ability to move around in the world, to meet with who you want to meet with, and to not feel like you're being monitored as you go about your everyday life.
What's the harm in you being filmed? What's wrong with it?
It infringes on our rights, and so we need to be really careful about the red lines we draw about what surveillance we're prepared to have in our society. We also don't know exactly how the police are using these kinds kinds of technologies, there's often a real lack of transparency around what the police are doing. Sometimes there isn't even a law saying that they can do it. So you say, well, perhaps if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. But actually, technology has been used in a variety of ways which I would say have reason to make us all fearful. I think looking to technology to give us a solution to these problems is not the answer. We need to instead be asking, just because we can use this technology, just because the capability might exist, should we? And where we're looking for solutions in technology, I think what we should instead be thinking about is what are the underlying causes that this is happening, what are relationships like between police and communities that are over-policed, how do we solve those problems? That's where the focus needs to be.
Ayesha sent me here because she thought it might change my mind about the role of technology in the fight against crime. And I've certainly seen my fair share of what tomorrow's world might look like. So has it convinced me? Well, not quite.
There's something deeply disturbing about the technology we've seen at this conference today. We've heard about drones that will replace police officers on the streets. We've heard about technology that will recognise faces and even artificial intelligence that can predict whether people are going to commit a crime in the first place. They say that it will reduce crime. They say that it's a useful weapon in the fight against crime. I don't think it is.
Today's evidence gathering is over. At the end of the week, both Ayesha and I will get the chance to present the key evidence to a special jury.
But for the moment, it's time to sum up our cases, having looked at the subject of policing. And I'm crystal clear where I stand.
I want the police to fight crime, whether that's out on the streets or behind closed doors. And I saw all of that with Greater Manchester Police.
Any cop, operational cop who wants a taser should have one. It saved us from a lot of injury where we have been confronted with knives, hammers, all sorts of stuff in the past, and that is a really good preventative measure.
But I think they need better tools to protect themselves and enforce the law. Some of the technology that Chris saw.
This is a full autonomous drone solution that is capable of taking off, conducting a mission, getting back and landing on its own. So it's going to be doing autonomously patrols. It can replace, theoretically, two guards going in a patrol car.
If we're going to get tough on crime, then surely the police need to get tough on criminals.
I, on the other hand, feel things aren't as clear-cut as Ayesha thinks they are.
We need to learn from what works, and we saw what works in Glasgow when we visited the Violence Reduction Unit. We met Callum, whose life was literally saved by a project that the police were supporting in a very different way from that which Ayesha is arguing for.
If I had left that hospital and went for retribution, I don't think I'd be in prison, I think I'd be dead.
Policing, when it works best, works in and with the communities that it serves. And Ayesha definitely saw that in practice when she met Ken Hines on the streets.
Please reach out, give me a call. Let's have a deeper conversation, because you could be an ambassador for stop and search, understand? So please, I'm your uncle, you hear what I'm saying? And I'm out here to safeguard you.
It's not about getting tough, it's about doing what works to reduce crime, and ultimately then, so we have fewer victims in the future.
Next time on Crime, Are We Tough Enough? Ayesha and I go to trial.
Everything Ayesha says sounds good, but almost everything she says is wrong.
And a jury of those we've met during the week hear our strongest evidence.
That is the reality of what we're dealing with.
And deliver a verdict on who they think has the strongest case.